to not go super long winded, basically what happened was I had these two things happening where there was this deep idolatry in my heart that came from woundedness. I grew up in this very, very successful family. Seeing all of this success, it caused me to start striving
Yeah.
and to start trying to prove myself and my worth. And the Lord just had to just start chopping. Because the more I leaned into him, um, when I would put my identity in the things I did, uh, I would, in his mercy, he would lead me towards embarrassment and failure. I wanted to create a movie where I would take these four boys out of gangs, prison, foster care, addiction, and pair them with wild Mustangs to tame and train over 2 months. And it seemed like the Lord was bringing this whole thing together, and he was. Oscar award winners started coming on board, Emmy award winners. Now we're able to raise millions of dollars and make this thing happen. And the reason you haven't heard of this movie, or now it's a series, is because it's not out yet. We filmed this thing in 2018, and we brought it out to Hollywood and started getting $1 million offers. And the Lord had to fully kill it. And in that process, I had to go back to investors, and I had to tell them that the Lord had given me and my wife dreams and visions to pull this thing from Hollywood.
Wow.
And, we're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt.
Yeah.
And I'm having to, in faith, because I'm hearing so clearly from the Lord, now pull this thing. And eventually the Lord started sending us checks, like literally like tax incentives from the state of Alabama, where we did post-production, where all of a sudden, like within a day, we have no debt. And like, so the obedience led to that, not being debt free, but the next thing that happened was the disappointment. And all of these people that I wanted their approval, and everyone thought I was going to be a big deal, right? Everyone's like, oh my gosh, he's doing it. He's 28 years old and he's now the executive producer of this show. Like, Ryan is the man. My wife's grandpa, who gave $1 million to the show, he literally was telling me he thinks I'm going to be the next Billy Graham. And now I'm getting phone calls from him and other people saying, you failed our money. And I just remember wanting to crawl into a hole and die. I stopped shaving. I stopped taking care of myself in many ways, just because my biggest idol was now crushed, which was acclaim. My idol was acclaim. It was not necessarily, money. I've never really cared about money. It's always just doing something noteworthy and having the people closest to me be like, wow, he really did it, didn't he? And the Lord had to kill it all. And in that moment, I had now written a book, because, I'm now, like, before, like, the marketing and distribution agency that's done Frozen to Hunger Games is now backing us. And so we got this like all-star team, and we pull this thing from Hollywood. And in the process of, like, when we thought it was going to be successful, this guy's telling me like, hey, you got this hit. You got to start writing a book now. So now I've got Bob Goff's book agent. Now, like, everything looks like it's just going to explode, and the whole thing just crumbles. And there's so many details I'm leaving out because it would take forever. But I'd written this book. It was a really crappy book, but 100,000 words written in a Google Doc. I didn't know what I was talking about, but the name of the book was Taming Mustangs. And it was talking about a lot of the wild men in the Bible. It was talking about a lot of my experience on the ranch. And eventually, like, in the process of just losing everything, it seemed like I had to go back to the Lord and say, Lord, what is this book? Now that everything else has died, do you still want me to write this book? And I didn't hear anything. So I just shut my laptop and I said, Lord, I'm not going to pick this book up again until you tell me what it's about. And the Lord started whispering the word meekness to me, which I thought was so boring. I'm like, dude, that is not a bestseller.
No.
Like, if you want to write a bestseller, you don't write about meekness. So I just kept hearing this when I was praying. I kept hearing the word meekness. And I had already had a chapter in the book on meekness. I called it the meekness paradox, where meekness isn't weakness, it's power and humility in one. And that's an okay definition. But the Lord started really uncovering to me what meekness is. And I started looking up, because I kept hearing it in prayer. I started looking up every verse on meekness. I started looking up what the Greek meaning was on meekness. And, so I pull up a Greek lexicon, and it's on my computer. My wife's upstairs, and I about fall off the couch, because I pull up the word meekness means praus, which means to tame a wild Mustang.
Yep.
And, man, I knew what that meant.
Yeah.
I just gone through months and months and months of watching Mustangs being tamed. And so I had this context. I had this picture that few people on the planet this window into what I believe is the picture of masculinity, which is meekness, because I watched it externally and I felt it internally. Which what happened is with that word meekness, uh, back the Greeks understood the context for this word because they, in order to cultivate these wild horse or cultivate these war horses, they'd go and find wild horses in the mountains, and they'd take these wild horses and they would meek them. They would uh, tame them into these war horses, and that process was painful for the horse because this horse had to go from being this autonomous, um, scarcity minded horse, always being so hyper vigilant about predators. They're prey animals. Horses are prey animals. They
Oh
have eyes on
yeah.
the side of their head, constantly scanning for predators. And so how do you take this thing, put it into a round pen where it instinctually knows you're a predator, and then get that thing to trust you? That's
Mm,
the question, right?
wow.
I've done it before. You take this prey animal, 1,000-pound prey animal, scared to death, able to kill you with a hoof, and you put it in a round pen where it's trapped. And the first step of getting this horse to become meek is called acknowledgement, where you pursue this wild Mustang around this round pen, and it's going buck wild. It's kicking, bucking, snorting. The dust is kicking up, and just this mayhem in this round pen. But the trainer says, just keep pursuing it, keep pursuing it. And the moment that horse gets curious and just stops for a second and looks at you, you completely relax your posture. You relax your shoulders and you walk away from the horse. You give it what it wants. It wants you to get the heck away from it. And so this horse starts to learn, the way I get this thing that I think is going to kill me to get away from me is I just look at it. And so over and over and over again, it starts looking at you. It just gets curious. And then the craziest thing happens after a couple of days, this thing starts to follow you. And it's as you pursue this horse, it's still freaking out. But the moment it acknowledges you and you walk away, you release the pressure, it's called, this thing starts to follow you. And then slowly you get close enough where you can touch it. And these are horses, right? They've never experienced a hand petting them before. And so it's like the best feeling in the world for them. They've never experienced that relationship, that intimacy, that touch before.
Hmm.
And soon this thing goes from being scared to death of you, about to kill you, to being the most loyal horse out there. And that's meekness. Meekness isn't weakness. Meekness is a complete, utter loss of your life. It's surrender. It's found in saying, I no longer am going to be the master of my life. I'm actually going to give the reins. I'm going to give my back. You can get on my back. And I'm going to be so in tune with you that with one nudge of the reins, I'm going to go where you tell me to go. And I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to anticipate where you want me to go. And then slowly you can get out of the round pen. You can go on some trail rides. And eventually the Lord will take you to war. But he'll only take you to war if you're meek enough to completely reject the self, completely reject everything that you once found valuable, and to say, I'll go wherever you call me to go. And that's what the world's missing. That's why the world's broken.
For the rest of the conversation, check out episode 734 of the Men in the Arena podcast called Wild Obedience: What Real Biblical Masculine Strength Looks Like.